Okay, I'm going to start this impromptu. This is a pre-recorded live stream. Actually, I'm not even streaming. I'm going to upload this. So it's about 5 minutes after 11 a.m. It is the 29th of February 2020. It's a Saturday. It's leap year. This is a leap year 2020, February 29th. I think 8 years ago today, Davy Jones of the monkeys died. As I remember that, I think it was February 29th. I could be wrong, but I'll have to look it up. But pretty sure he did 8 years ago today. Weird. So every 4 years we have a leap year. So I thought I would do a random rant. I'm going to kind of title this "Help by the Dashboard's Light" name in it. Kind of wanted to make some comments, and I'm going to move on to different subjects. The other day, Bill TFL at War's channel, Bill Greathouse, re-uploaded a live stream of Help by the Dashboard Light, and the premise of his live stream was that the elites or the people in power, there's always a secret agenda to push these different. There's a secret agenda behind TV advertisers that they really basically don't need money. It's all about social control. And I thought this theory I had in my head years ago, but I've kind of rescinded it since then. The idea is that I guess Hell by the Dashboard Light was saying in his live stream that is it possible that the people that are pushing these advertising campaigns with interracial couples are really trying to push interracial marriage and dating versus selling product? And no, I'm gonna interrupt him and say you're wrong. Everything that is marketed toward an audience that specific advertisers feels that it will work. Um, and when you're trying to market a general run-of-the-mill product like Cheerios, which is purchased by multiple people, it really doesn't matter how you twist the commercial. Okay, um, you're more apt, for example, to get a more diverse audience if you're marketing something like Cheerios. Like I've seen a Cheerios ad where there's a white father and a black mother, and of course they have interracial kids. And then I think they did one with a black father and a white mother with interracial kids. They've done it on both ends, by the way. And the idea is, according to Hell by the Dashboard Light, is that they're really not trying to sell Cheerios or the product. They're just trying to push you on the idea that they want to reinvent the world into some hodgepodge of, caramel colored people. That's not his words, but it's kind of that's where he was going with that. And I would say that he's way off base there. I'll give you an example. A Sealy Posturepedic mattresses have, anytime you see a Sealy Posturepedic mattress commercial, I have never, ever seen one with an interracial couple. Now, someone may be able to prove me wrong here, but in all the years that I've seen these commercials on TV in the past, up to recently, I've never seen them push it. And the idea of a product selling something based on an agenda it's product specific. The same thing with NASCAR. A NASCAR would never show an interracial couple. If NASCAR wanted to hurt their ratings, the worst thing they would ever want to do is show an interracial couple, a black father and a white mother, watching NASCAR together with their interracial kids and saying, "Go, go Dale Earnhardt Jr. or go this." They're very careful on what they do because the bottom line is money, and the bottom line is profits. Because if that was the case, Sealy Posturepedic would always be showing interracial couples. Um, NASCAR would only show interracial couples if they wanted to push the interracial agenda. So companies have to understand that there's certain things that are not going to be very good for the almighty dollar. And so what they do is they decide to push this agenda in, when you're selling a Nike commercial or something, you might, if you're selling, the National Football League shows a lot of interracial couples and interracial friendships too, by the way. Don't ever leave out the interracial friendships that happen in commercials too. They seem to be very specifically marketed toward people that congregate towards certain products. The National Football League can market interracial friendships and even relationships because the National Football League is in and of itself a very it has a multiracial audience to it. You know, you have Hispanics, you have blacks, and you have whites that all like to watch the NFL. And so that's why they put these interracial friendships slash relationships in these commercials, because they're speaking to the choir, whereas NASCAR can't do that. Sealy Posturepedic doesn't want to show a black man waking up to his white wife in bed and then saying, "Oh, we slept good, honey," and kissing her good night or good morning. The bottom line is money. And I don't think that somebody left a comment in the suggestion saying that he's way off base. And I agree, because Hell by the Dashboard Light, is intelligent as he is, he's very stupid in some ways. He jumps the gun. Another thing I've noticed that Hell by the Dashboard likes to do is he likes to focus on gay people a lot in his videos. And he seems to think that the reason why men aren't succeeding with women nowadays is because of this gay agenda that they're pushing. But I really don't see the gay agenda being pushed in the real world. That's just television. In the real world, when you go out into the real world, I don't see any indication that this exists at all. I don't see anybody at the gym that even is close to being flamboyantly gay. What I see are a bunch of guys that are very reserved. They've got their headphones on. They're doing their workout by themselves, as is the case with the women. And I don't see any indication of socialization between gay couples in public. In fact, the weird thing about it is, and he's a different generation than me. I'm 17, 18 years older than him. He doesn't remember when I actually remember the 80s and the early 90s. Particularly the late 80s. And even with the AIDS crisis in the late 80s, the gay lifestyle was very flamboyantly open. It was very much out of the closet. I mean, gay nightclubs were huge in the 80s and even through the early to mid 90s. Openly gay people were unbelievably overly abundant in public. So I don't see these openly flamboyant people in my city. Now, it could be different in New York and LA, but I tend to think that he's just way off base when he starts to blame the TFL problem because gay people somehow are usurping the relationship industry. I came to a conclusion that is just it's so blatantly obvious. It's staring you right in the face. It's called the law of supply and demand. And the law of supply and demand says that there's 4 variations of the law of supply and demand. Okay. I should do a separate video on this, but I don't feel like it right now. You've got what's called high supply, high demand. High supply, high demand. You got low supply, you got high supply, low demand. You've got low supply, high demand, and low supply, low demand. Okay, so let's look at this for a second. What is an example of a high supply, high demand item? I'm going to give you the most general category of them all: food in the United States. Food is the most high supply, high demand item there is. And the reason why it is because even a bum living in the street can get a free meal. There's people that'll go out to a Subway and say, "Look, I'm not going to give you any money, but I got you a sandwich at the local Subway." And the bum will be upset. He'll be like, "Damn, I wanted money. I didn't want this food." There's plenty. The bum on the street in LA or in New York is not pining for food. He's pining for money so he can buy booze or drugs. Okay, that's usually the case. So if you go up to a bum on the street and you tell him, "Look, I just went to Subway. I got a half a sandwich. Why don't you eat?" Or you buy him a fresh sandwich, never been open, and you say to the bum, "Well, I'm not going to give you any money, but I'll tell you what, I've got you a $6 or $7 footlong from Subway, and this is what I'm going to give you because I feel sorry for you." That bum's going to look at you like he's going to be pissed off at you. He's going to be like, "No, I want the money. I want the cash. I want to be able to buy my wine, my cheap Mad Dog wine, or I want to buy cigarettes." He's going to basically be pissed off at you. So food, in many cases, is a high supply, high demand item. You need to eat, so it's high supply. But there's also a high demand, there's a high supply of it because it's everywhere in America. but there's also a high demand for it because without food, you can't survive. The bum on the street drinking wine and smoking crack, he still has to eat. So there's a high supply and high demand for food. Now let's go into the other thing: high supply, low demand. Or no, let's do another example of high supply, high demand is water. In the Great Lakes region of the United States, water is everywhere. I mean, it rains a lot in the Great Lakes region, and there's fresh water everywhere. So water is a high supply, but it's also a high demand. You cannot live without water. You have to drink water. You have to have water every day to survive. You got to cook with it. You clean with it. You drink it. You cook your food. I mean, obviously, you cook your food with it. You can't make rice. All your dry goods require any dry goods that you have in your house for a rainy day, for a cataclysmic event, need water to dehydrate them. So you need water. Okay, let's go into a high supply, low demand. Something that's high supply but has a very low demand. Okay, there's a high supply of let's say soybeans. Okay, let's use a high supply, low demand of soybeans. You can have a situation where there's a huge supply of farmers are paid, they grow soybeans, but there might be so much soybeans out there that there's a low demand for it. I'll tell you what, I'll give you a better, yeah. So you could have a situation where you have a high demand, high supply of soybeans, but a low demand. Maybe people stop eating soy. Maybe they're tired of eating soy because they want to eat more vegetables. They don't want to be eating soybeans all the time. Maybe they're meat eaters and maybe they want to get their protein from a steak or from chicken or whatever. Low demand there. Let's move on to the next example. I'm just doing these off the cuff. So low supply, high demand. Okay, a low supply, high demand. This would be where there's a low supply of something. This is the most common thing, by the way. Low supply, high demand is what makes you rich. Low supply, high demand would be gold. Gold is a very low supply, but there's a very high demand for it because jewelers need gold to make money. It's not just diamonds they sell gold, 24 karat gold, 14 karat gold, 18 karat gold. Gold is a very low supply item, but there's a big demand for it. If you have your money in gold, you've got at least intrinsic value backing it up. If gold was, if a meteor hit the earth or spread, let's say a meteor shower came down and spread nothing but gold on the planet, the demand for gold would go down. It'd crash the economy. So low supply, high demand would be gold. Platinum is another low supply, high demand. There's not a lot of platinum. So they have low supply, low demand. Now you got a low supply, high demand, excuse me. Then you could have the last one would be low supply of something, but also a low demand of something. Okay, a low supply, low demand could be anything. It could be a virus. It could be a bacteria. It could be, a certain bacteria. There's a low supply of it, but there's also a low demand of it. We don't necessarily need it for our own personal consumption. An example of a low supply, low demand. I'm trying to think of an element that maybe one of the 103 elements out there that we don't really, there's a low supply of it, but there's also a low demand of it. Mercury might be one of them. There's a low supply. Mercury bulb thermostats are obsolete. There's not a lot of mercury, but there's not a big demand for it like there used to be. They were used in switches because mercury poisoning is obviously a big issue. A low supply, low demand, and people are going to laugh at this. Uranium. There's not there's a low supply of it, but there's not a big demand for uranium because uranium is so dangerous. Most governments don't know. I think most of us would agree that uranium is something we don't want in our backyard. We don't want to have a nuclear powered car, a nuclear powered motorboat. So there's a low supply of it, but there's also a low demand for it. We don't want uranium, so Good riddance. We don't need it. So you got four different variations of the law of supply and demand. You got high demand, high supply, high demand, um, high supply, low demand, low supply, high demand, and low supply, low demand. If anybody wants to leave comments in the suggestion box. Give me examples of these high supply, high demand, these four variations of this, because there's four of them. Now, what we have in the dating scene today, and this is so obvious, this has got nothing to do with gays and trans people. We have a situation with men where you have a high supply, you have a low or with women. We'll go from the point of view from men. There's a high supply of men and there's a low demand for men. Why is there a high supply of men and there's a low demand for men? Because men make up generally 3 to 4% more of the nubile population. The men make up a bigger percentage of the population based on reproduction. And we'll take it between the ages of 18 to 50. I'll stretch it out to 50, 18 to 50. There are way more men being born today, and there's not enough jobs. Men now, most of the jobs that men used to do can be automated. Most of the jobs, like the jobs that men used to do, like factory assembly lines, have now been automated. So they've taken the supply, the demand for men is less, because you have a huge supply of men out there and a low demand for men in the workforce, with the exception of certain things like skilled trades. You know, high supply and a low demand. Also in the dating market, because women are working in these fields now, like women are 50% of the tow motor operators are women now. 50% of the staff at most of your store stock clerks are women. 50% of women in it seems like 30 to 50% of the people in medical school now are women, if not more. So there's a low demand for men in these fields now, because men are not as valued in these fields, because most of these are going to women now. Scholarships prove that. Okay, also in the dating scene, well, why would there be a high demand for men in the dating market when the roles of men have changed so much that guys, basically male labor, is not valuable anymore, so women don't need to cling to a guy. Women are on hormonal birth control, which affects their sex drive, so women don't have the sexual urge like they used to, so there's no demand for men. And there are just too plain, and I'll make it the most obvious, there are just too many men out there. Men are exposable. I mean, this is the worst place for men to be. There is a high supply of them, but a low demand for them. Women have no real incentive to save their virginity. Even if they save their virginity, there's no incentive to save yourself for that right guy, because they're a dime a dozen. You know, guys that are willing to commit to a woman are a dime a dozen. Guys that are willing to be completely monogamous with the woman and take care of her and be a good husband to her are a dime a dozen. And that's the reality of it. So there's a high supply of men, but there's a low demand for their romantic, for them to be the romantic partners for women. Now let's reverse this around. What do we have with women? We have a low supply and a high demand. We're reversing this: low supply, high demand, just like gold. Women are like the gold standard in a way. They're like the platinum gold standard. Why are they? Because there are less women nowadays, because there's fewer wars that kill the men off, which I forgot to mention. There's more men out there because the birth rate in some countries like China is 117 boys to every 100 girls, and in America it's about a 105. It's 105 boys to every 100 women. So for every 205 births, there's a surplus of 5 men, 105 men to 100 women. It's about a roughly 4%. In addition to that, I would venture to say that the demographic is even worse than that. I think that if you really look, there's this thing I term the term dating limbo. Women are now in a perpetual state of dating limbo, where they don't date for multiple years. So what does that do? it makes it makes the demand for women even higher. Because if women are in a perpetual state of dating limbo because they're in college, their careers, they're maybe raising a child, there's no demand. You create an artificial demand. So women fall into low supply, high demand. Men fall into the high supply, low demand. And can you see how this thing can mess itself up? This is why it's not realistic to be going out there and blaming the problem on some boogeyman like Alex Dashboard likes to do, Hell by the Dashboard Light, where he likes to talk about how the world is this big pro-gay conspiracy, and everyone is trying to pine. It's all the gay people's fault, and the transvestites are the reason why Alex can't find a woman in his life. There is a high supply of men, but there's a low demand. There's a low supply of women, but there's an awful high demand. Now, if this thing had been not necessarily reversed, but let's say that there was a high supply of men, low demand, like there is now, but there was a low supply of women, but low demand, this could be a game changer. But I don't see any indication that there's a low demand for women, because we clearly see that the dating sites have shown that there is no low demand for women at all. When you got 10 men on a dating site for every 1 or 1.5 women, that is very problematic. So if you have 1.5 women for every 10 guys, or even 2 women for every 10 guys, or one woman for every 5 guys, if you want to break it down to the lowest common denominator, that's not a good situation. 1 woman for every 5 guys or 4 guys. Let's say out of 5 people, 4 are men and 2 are women, or 1 are women. You're not in a good situation. So men in this day and age fall into high supply, low demand, because the demand factor is determined by the women. But 2 sources: the employers, women and employers. There's a high supply, low demand, and for women, it's a lower supply but a higher demand, and the market dictates that. And I'm sorry, you don't want to hear the term the market, but let's take it for what it really is. There is a supply and demand issue here. We can blame this thing on social engineering. I don't care, even if there was some social engineering involved. The bottom line is men don't have any value. And I'm being objective about this. There's no emotions with this thing. Okay. Now let me repeat what I was going to, or finish what I was going to say about the low demand thing. If, for example, there was a low supply of women in the mating arena, but there was a low demand. Let's say men went MGTOW and they were serious about it. Let's say the coronavirus has got one thing going for it. It makes the sex drive of men very low. It wipes out a man's testosterone level. He gets a low sex drive. Now you'd have a low supply of women, but you'd still have a low demand for women. So that might be a good thing. That could be a game changer for some guys that maybe maintain their strong sex drive. If men, for example, had a lower testosterone level, or maybe men were not as interested in women. Let's say men got horribly addicted to video games, and the Playboy Mansion the Playboy Mansion models couldn't make these guys just leave their screens. They're sitting on their planet. That's called low supply but low demand, where we know that that situation might be a game changer for men. But there's no indication that women are in low demand. They're in high demand. There's a low supply of them. There's a high demand. Men is just the opposite. There's a high supply of men out there, very horny, lonely men out there, and there's a high supply and a low demand. Meaning nobody wants men. Okay, nobody really wants a man. Men don't even want men. Men don't even value other men as friends. That's how bad. In fact, if you guys want a case study, just listen to Hell by the Dashboard Light's previous videos, where he even says he doesn't want to have a male friend. He doesn't value other men outside of this. He just feels that men are a burden to him. He doesn't want to talk to men at the gym. He doesn't want to be social with men at the gym. He views men as high supply, low demand. He proves that. You know, the law of high supply, low demand even applies toward intersexual relations between men or the same sex friendships. Because there's such a high supply of men, and and because there's so many men out there, there's a low demand for them. Men don't even want to be friends with other men. That's amazing, isn't it? This is the law of supply and demand here. So women are the prize, men are not such a prize. Men are a burden. Um, there is no solution to this. I've never offered a solution to it. I believe that we have to be realistic about this, and we have to not look for pie in the sky fantasies of women hitting the wall. Again, I don't care if women hit the wall. There's still there's still a low supply, high demand. Even when they hit the wall, they're low supply, high demand. Even when men make good money, there's still high supply, low demand. There's plenty of guys in Silicon Valley that make good money, but there's a low demand for them. So that's why you got all these guys that live in Silicon Valley that make good money relative of where they're living. Of course, I shouldn't say relative because it is expensive to live in Silicon Valley. But there's a high supply of men and a low demand for them. And if you don't understand the high supply, low demand as it relates to the dating scene, you're going to be lost in this thing. I don't have a solution for it, and I don't propose a solution, and I don't think MGTOW is the solution, because MGTOW, what's fake about MGTOW is that even if you could get men to acknowledge the MGTOW philosophy, you're still going to have a high supply and a low demand. It doesn't matter whether you live MGTOW or not. Actually, it would. If MGTOWs could recruit a conscious 50% of the population, they'd have to get a huge. It might be a game changer because they could, if they lived up to it. But most MGTOW men are all pining for women. Almost all of them are. They're all phonies. They're all having a mental nervous breakdown. MGTOWs, men going their own way for short. For those that don't know what MGTOW is, MGTOW, it stands for men going their own way. MGTOW men are all secretly pining for women. So it doesn't matter that they point all these flaws out in the court system and this is wrong and that's wrong. At the end of the day, these men all desire women. Hence my philosophy: high supply or low supply, high demand. They are willing to put themselves out there and admit that they're in an indirect way that they're lonely. That's why we have the incel problem. The incel problem, we can blame it on social engineering, but the fact remains is that if you break it down to the most elemental point of view, it's men are high supply, low demand, women are low supply, high demand. There's a high supply of men, but there's not enough takers. If there was a high supply of men, but men were like water, where yes, there's a high supply of it in some areas, but there's also a high demand for it, then everybody would be having a good time. And you could take it and leave it. But that's not the case because women aren't taking the bait. Low supply of women, meaning there's not enough women to go around. And this could be artificial scarcity. Like I said, dating limbo is real. There are women that go years and years and years without a boyfriend. Divorced women that haven't dated in years. And remember this too, guys, understand this. Anytime a woman takes a hiatus from dating for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, there's one more man that's competing. And women are in high demand. Even divorcees with 4 kids from 3 different baby daddies, they are in high demand. So this is the reality of the dating scene today. I am breaking it down to the most elemental level that there is. This is Dating Economics 101. You guys can twist this any way you want to. We could blame it on the Rosicrucians. We can blame it on the Anunnakis, the Ashkenazis. We can blame it on the Catholic Church. But everything boils down to the most basic level of supply and demand. High supply, high demand. High supply, low demand. Low supply, high demand. and low supply, low demand. And men are at the reverse end of where women are. They are the high supply and low demand, and women are the low supply, high demand. I think is so simple. I don't care who you blame this dating system on. I don't care what social change you blame it on. I don't care. It all boils down to simple mathematics. It's real simple. We don't need to blame it. The blame game is ridiculous because the blame game says the blame game is what makes people argue as to what's who and what is causing this. Is it the hormonal birth control? Is it the fact that women now have jobs and don't need men? Is it the fact that women are trying to one up men to win a war? Is it the fact that men are more horny because of pornography? Is it the fact that this and that, yada yada yada? Is it the media? Is it because 21 years of Law and Order? Is it the Me Too movement? Guess what, guys? Supply and demand. Supply and demand. There's more horny, lonely men out there than there are women, and so few women that want to take on these men. And with the women, it's just the opposite. There's such a few supply of them. I don't care if it's artificial means of false scarcity or whatnot. There's a low supply of women and a high demand for women. So there you go, guys. It is that simple. The laws of supply and demand. I cannot think of any other way to simplify this. Now, the solutions to if you're looking for solutions to how to change the market, and yes, dating and marriage is a market. I don't care if you commodify, it is a commodity. Call it, I know a few people that are going to get offended by the term, oh, you're commodifying, you're turning this into some kind of commodity. We're talking about human beings, Steve. No, we have to be realistic. If the yellow pages in your town is filled with lawyers, and there's few people that need these lawyers. If you took a bunch of trial lawyers and took them down to West Virginia where people don't have money, you could have 1,000 lawyers in a town of people that make the per capita income is $6,000 a year. There's not going to be a very big demand for lawyers if you don't, or dentists. Okay, a lot of people in West Virginia have dental problems, and it's sad. And I'm not being funny here. And if you have a bunch of wealthy guys that start their own dental practice in West Virginia in a small town, but there's nobody there that's got the money to pay for your dental services, and guess what? You have a high supply and a low demand. That's what you got with men, a high supply and a low demand. And with women, it's just the opposite. You have a low supply and a high demand. And this is basically, in a nutshell, what is dictating the dating scene today. Now, think about this 50 years, or let's say 1950. When a woman would say to her granddaughter, hey, Sally, you better sweep up that Steve guy or that Frank guy. Frank has got a good job at the steel mill. And, he's making really good money, and he's a good provider. And all you've done since you graduated high school is worked as a secretary. And the steel mill women can't make what men are making. You got to snag this guy. You got to snag this guy now. He's got a good job. He can provide for the family. He can give you a nice home in the suburbs. That's when around the time the suburbs started, late 40s, early 50s. He can build you a beautiful home. Say, honey, you better grab this guy now. You better grab him now, but some other woman's going to grab him. And boom, the woman grabbed him. Everything, it worked out perfectly. And you could almost say that there was a low supply of men and a high demand for men in the late 40s, early 50s. A lot of men came back from the war with shell shock, and most of them died, actually. A lot of them died. Now, you reverse that around. Years ago, women, there was a high supply of women. At that same time period, there was a high supply of women, but a more minimal demand. I don't say a low demand, a minimal demand, because men knew that they could afford to hold out. But most guys didn't, because there were some things involved, like societal obligations to, not sleep around. And men didn't really do that. Men were pretty much just, going to find a wife and boom, you get married. High supply, in the dating scene today is that it's all bets are off. It is an economic, it is a commodity. Men are just not valuable. Now I can reverse this around here, guys. I'm going to make you feel better about yourselves because I think that this makes me feel better myself saying this, but one guy was saying that if, I think it was a guy that I had interviewed, his name was First. I don't know his first name yet, but he said that women say that there's kind of a counter argument with the feminists that society doesn't owe you a girlfriend. Society doesn't owe you as a man a wife. Well, you can reverse this around and say, okay, well then society doesn't owe you protection. Society doesn't owe you patronizing your restaurants, or this is my words, like if a woman owns a restaurant, her and her girlfriends or family own a restaurant, and they serve alcohol, overpriced alcohol, and moderately priced food. You as a man don't owe it to them to frequent that restaurant. You have no incentive to do it. So there are some positives to retaliating against this. There's so many times where I come back from the gym, I would like to stop for a beer and grab a sandwich and sit down. Who knows? Maybe I will. Maybe I'll sit down and the waitress will be a girl sitting next to me. Maybe a 35, 40-year-old woman, maybe a single mother even. Yes, I would date a single mother. Yes, guys, I would. Sorry, but I hate to burst your bubble, but you're all delusional if you say that, oh, dude, don't date single mothers. Oh, no, 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 no. You date a single mother. I would date a single mother. Okay, so in my mind, when I'm coming back from the gym or coming back from, visiting my relative in the nursing home, there's a part of me that says, yeah, stop. Not much to stop and spend 20, 30 bucks, 20 bucks. Grab a beer. I don't like to drink and drive. So, or grab it I'll talk about that later, but grab a beer, grab a sandwich and sit down at the bar and maybe something will happen. Maybe you'll talk to a woman and maybe get a phone number. Well, I don't do that. I just simply don't do that anymore. I go home, I contemplate that I can get a steak for half the price, a third the price, or chicken or whatever. And I can go home, cook it up, watch Netflix. So in a way, society doesn't owe me a woman, but restaurants don't. I don't owe those restaurants and those places where I would normally want to meet a woman at, or socialize with a woman, or take her on a date to one of those places. I don't owe them my business. I don't owe them my business. And this is a good way to retaliate. I mean, you don't owe them your business. And if society says to you as a man that, you're not owed I think holding the door is pretty common sense, guys. I mean, I don't want to say, well, men don't owe it to women to hold the door. I have women at the gym all the time hold the door for me. I mean, that's just common courtesy. You're going to a building, of course you're going to hold the door. It's just rude to drop it in their face. You don't want to be an ass. I mean, that's just stupidity. But as a man, you don't owe it to a woman to stop at the side of the road and help her change your tire. Not that she can't get AAA to do it for her, but occasionally I do see a woman on the side of the road, a young girl changing a tire or trying to. You as a man don't owe it to that girl to change your tire. Also, you don't owe her protection. You don't owe it to her if she's in a fight with, let's say she is dating a psychopathic lunatic boyfriend, and maybe her culture commands her to do that. You don't owe it to her to jump. You don't even owe it to her to call 911, let alone jump in and risk getting stuck with a knife or shot. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, if I saw a woman in duress and it was a hillbilly boyfriend beating her up, I'd probably call 911. I'd say, look, there's a situation out here. It needs to be done. That's just common courtesy. But I certainly don't owe it to her to risk my life getting killed. And men can get some freedom from this. This is where the ideology of men going their own way is that men are going to start to insulate themselves from these things. This does give men a lot of power in their own lives, because MGTOW, if practiced the way it was supposed to be practiced, is that men literally find things, develop a philosophy that doesn't revolve around the acceptance of women, which I know is very hard, because if MGTOW really worked, there wouldn't be all these guys putting up channels and then deleting them after 2 or 3 months. Okay, there have been some prominent MGTOW guys that have come and gone, 50 to 100 of them in the last 6 years. I've seen some guys that put up 50, 75, 150, 70, 250 videos, and boom, the whole channel's down. And it's not YouTube scrubbing them, it's themselves scrubbing them. It's that simple. And so MGTOW would be the way to go if it was really practiced. So you've got this problem with supply and demand. How do we break supply and demand? I guess you go your own way. You decide what are the things. Let me tell you from this point of view. What are the things you would normally do to attract a woman that aren't going to work anymore? Like going out to the clubs, going out to the bars, going out to the restaurants, spending money on dating courses, going online, personals, anything that involves you spending time and money to attract something. You don't owe it to society to participate in that anymore. Sitting at a Starbucks drinking a $3 coffee or a $2 basic house blend coffee, waiting for something magical to happen. Again, you don't owe it. You don't owe it to Starbucks to even blow $2 in there. So that's about the best thing I can tell you. Now, tipping waitresses, if I'm going to eat out, I'm tipping 20%, or at least 15%. I'm going to do it. I don't care whether it pisses guys off. I'm going to do it. It's common courtesy. Women would tip you if you were the waiter. I think that's common courtesy. I don't agree with not tipping a woman. Okay, they work hard for their money, and just like guys do it too. But you don't owe it to these establishments to go out there to eat and drink in the first place. So the first place it's going to start is in the restaurant and bar industry. And yes, it's true, the women patrons probably can care less. They sit on their own side of the table anyways. But the bar owners, many of them are women, do care. Because if there's fewer couples going out, they don't even give women half off drinks anymore. That's another thing. I've noticed another thing is women are so averse to men today. They don't even want free drinks. They don't even want half off drink specials for women only, because women don't even want to be near men. They don't even want to be, like I said, there's such a high supply of these men out there, and there's such a low demand that they don't want to be hounded when they get to the bar. So they don't have ladies' night anymore. There's no demand for ladies' night anymore, because even though women make up half the patrons at the bar, they all have their own section that they sit in. They self-segregate themselves. And again, we get into supply and demand. So men today are in a very, very tough spot. They're in a very, very tough spot. Hell, this might be the subject of a novel I might write. I've written books before. I've written 2 books. One's actually published, but one's on marathon training. One of them is on, it's a dystopian book I wrote a long time ago. I haven't finished it. But actually 2 books I've not published yet, but 2 of them have the potential. So you're out in this world, and you're a man going your own way, or you're forced to go your own way, and you're trying to find meaning in this life. And I'm going to tell you guys that you don't owe it to White Night for Women. You don't owe it to go to restaurants, 50% of which might be owned by women or their family. You don't owe it to join a rally for the Pink Cross Foundation, the Susan G. Komen Foundation. Although I do think it's for a good cause. I think that breast cancer awareness is a great thing for women, but you don't owe it to women to do that. If your goal is to woo a woman by joining a cause like that, I think I would think twice about it. You don't owe anybody anything. Hell, I'll even go as far to say you don't even owe men anything. You really don't owe it. Now I don't think that men should ignore each other. I think that I mean, the high supply, low demand of men is so bad that even men don't want other men in their lives. You know, if there was a high supply or low supply, low demand, or high supply demand for women, low supply of men, but a high demand, men would be best friends. Men would be out there fishing, hunting, foraging in the forest. They'd be like two peas in a pod. Um, there is just no demand for these men anymore. But you can reverse this. And I love living a somewhat minimalistic life, although I'm not living minimalistically yet. I got to really get down to the basics. Um, this low supply, low demand, or high supply of men, low demand for them. It is a painful reality to live through, guys. I know it is, but it's it's a reality that if you don't come to your own senses about this and accept this situation for what it is, this is the economics of sexuality 101. And I don't care who we blame it on. I'll repeat what I said just a few minutes ago. I don't care who you blame it on. Blame it on the media. Blame it on Martians. Blame it on the Anunnaki. Blame it on the reptilians. Blame your dateless situation on a million other things. It doesn't matter. It all boils down to supply and demand. Men are in high supply, but they're in low demand. Women are in low supply and high demand. I don't care artificial means or not. That's just the way it is. You can argue it all you want to. I guarantee every rationale you used as to what ails the dating scene, think of supply and demand. It is a supply and demand issue. So, what do we do about this situation? What do we do about this situation? We have to live our lives. I guess that's the best answer to it. There is no proactive strategy to do it. Next time you drive past a restaurant and you're in the mood for a beer, ask yourself this question: am I going to this restaurant with the hope that I'm going to meet a woman, that I'm going to get a phone number or a couple phone numbers? I'm going to develop a friendship. I'm going to get laid. Okay, let's put it. And if if you really are honest with yourself and you're totally upfront with yourself as to why you're doing this, just remember what I said. You're in low supply or high supply, but you're in low demand. That's enough to keep you driving to your destination back home. Pick up a 6-pack of beer, get yourself a Red Baron's pizza, or get yourself some frozen wings. Sit at home, watch an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents on your YouTube, on your iPhone or your Android. It's what I do. I love Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I love mystery shows. I love Tales from the Dark Side, all those types of shows from the 50s and 60s. Those are great shows. But there is some relief or solace in this. Read a good book, build your vocabulary, become an ardent reader. Start to read books. Start to just sit down and read books left and right. Just voraciously read. Get yourself a Kindle reader. You can get a cheap one, or you can do it on your iPhone too, or your Android. But you can read Kindle books. A lot of them are free, by the way. Read Kindle books, or just get yourself some books from the library. Just research things. Oh my. This is such a magnificent time to be living in a way, because it absolves us of the responsibility of having to support a family. The laws of supply and demand do not favor men today. The only way you have to work within a system. You have to work within a system that is that can give you the optimal happiness. And that's it. Now it's unfair. I'm at the time of doing this 49 years old. So for a young guy, it's not much of a, for a guy that's 22 years old and is looking at being a virgin for the rest of his life, this is probably not very encouraging. And if you're 22, you're a virgin. You're probably going to either be a virgin the rest of your life, or you're going to have a woman that's got 5 kids from 3 different baby daddies. You're probably going to have to settle for that. Yeah, it's probably what you're going to get. And the future of dating is probably going to be multiple men sharing one woman. You're going to have multiple men sharing one woman. If you guys want to add some input to this, I'd love to see a video response to this. This would be fantastic. If you want to really discuss this supply and demand issue further, do an audio video response. You could really make this a better option. Just do an audio response, put RE, supply and demand to my video, and tell me your perspective on the supply and demand. Tell me what your perspective on this issue of why men can't make it in the dating scene, and tell me how it relates to supply and demand. And if you do want to argue a point and say, no, it's not this, it's not that, it's this, I'll go right back to supply and demand, because I don't care what the circumstances is as to how did we get here. Supply and demand. It's the Rosicrucians doing this. Supply and demand. It's hormonal birth control. Supply and demand. It's the feminists pushing fourth wave feminism. Supply and demand. Men are simps. Supply and demand. People got to get to know one another. Supply and demand. Women just don't need men. They got all the jobs. Supply and demand. Everything is boiling down to supply and demand. I don't know how to simplify this anymore. This is as simple as it gets. Supply and demand. Every rationale as to why the dating scene is what it is today, the divorce industry is what it is, the relations between the sexes, it all boils down to supply and demand. There are more men pining for women, but there aren't enough women pining for men. Hell by the dashboard light. I hate to put a monkey wrench in your mental intellectual machinery with your useless PhD that you acquired in physics, but that's the fact, Jack. That's the fact, Jack. And you're a lot more educated than me. I'm sure you would have made me look like a fool in science in all these high-end physics classes. My brain would have been melting, and you would have just been absorbing your physics. The bottom line, hell by the dashboard light or Alex dashboard, supply and demand. Every rationale you have for your problems with not being able to get a woman falls into one thing and one thing only: supply and demand. Okay, I said all I'm going to say. I'm out of here. You guys have a great day.